Hey guys, how's it going? Jay here. This is smarthelping.com. We've got another joint venture waterfall. It's a preferred return model, and it is an additional tier. So it works the same way as I've done about 3 or 4 different versions of this. And this works exactly the same. You don't lose any functionality, but what I've done is added a split so that cash flows can be split at a certain rate up until the preferred return has been met for the LP. Before, well, in all the different preferred returns, the most basic was 100% goes to the LP until they've gotten their pref, which is just this amount here, whatever that is. It could compound or not or accrue. Um, you can configure that up here in these boxes. But anyway, the initial version was everything goes to the LP until this is paid. After that's paid, then you could split at some rate, and then I've done another trigger where you can split at some rate until the LP's equity is fully repaid as well, and then after that you can split it at a final rate. So none of that's different. That's the same. We've maintained all that logic here. I did update some of the labelings down below in the limited partner and general partner so you can see individual tiers. Um, and this is especially important now that we've got the pref. So what this allows you to do, let's say the LP and GP contributed capital, and you want to give the GP a pref as well as well, obviously the LPs. Everything's based on the LP's returns, but you also want to match a GP um, return. Well, to do that, there's first of all you would set the contributions and distributions the same. So I'd say 90-10 here and 90-10 here. Now, what that does is proportionally gives the LP and GP back capital until the LPs reached this pref hurdle, whatever it might be, and the GP is getting 10% now on each year. So you can see there's 140,000. Well, here we're short, but even though we're short, normally the whole 140 would go to the LP. Instead, now 126,000 goes to the LP, another 14 goes to the GP because of this 90-10 split. So what that is saying is the cash is split 90-10 until the LP has fully reached their pref that's been due. Now you can choose to have the pref or profits above this reduce the capital, which I've done here. So that's why you see the pref actually going down and the equity basis going down. And after that happens, we then are only in this tier. And then once the capital is repaid, so in this case, the LP is 1.3 million, then we move to the final split, which you can adjust all of these. You can see the capital repayment here. If you sum these up, it equals 1.35. No matter how you split these cash flows or what you do, if there's enough cash to return, that total will be here. And then we get to the final tier where we're splitting things 50-50 with the GP and LP. So that's the update of this model. It's going to be a standalone, so this will have a separate page, a separate download. It'll be a $45 one-time fee, and you can play with this with different scenarios, different preferred return rates, um, and different configurations for this. And all you do for the contributions and distributions is you plug in the required cash flows up top in contributions, and the distributions in the second row, and everything works from that. Now let's say in year one you had more cash. Say you had 200,000 available. Well, now we have enough to cover the whole pref for the LP, plus the GP is getting 16.5 in this case. And you can see here if I were to take the pref due of 148 divided by that, I got a total of 165, and then 10% of that is what will go to the GP, which is 16,500, which you see here. And then there's a little bit left. You can see there's 35,000 left after we've covered the LP and GP's pref. So that is split at this 90-10 rate as well. And notice the IRR is different here because obviously we have a 50-50 split. If I set this the same as well, the IRRs would be the same. But if I set this different, obviously the GP is going to get more since they only contributed 10%. But look it up to tier 2. It's 90-10 here, 90-10 here. So what that means is since that's the same pari passu with the contribution rate, the IRRs for GP and LP will be the same after this tier, which you can check here. You can see if I plug in, let's see, for the LP it'd be this, the pref, and then the return of capital. And then for the GP, it would be the contribution plus the pref plus, in this case, tier 2 is the corresponding with the LP's return of capital. Note, tier 2 here would only work for the LP. It would only make sense to show up when you're not reducing the equity balance. If you are reducing the equity balance with the extra profits above the pref, then that is tier 2 for the LP, and it would just be whatever equals their initial investment repayment amount. But you can see here, if I did IRR on both these, it'd be the same, whatever that might be. Well, yeah, 11% because that's the rate here, and we're compounding. So you can see there, it's the same for both. And that's because we've gone pari passu with the distributions in the pref and in up to the equity repayment amount. Now, if you were to not make these pari passu, say the LP contributed 90%, GP did 10, but you're going to give 100%. And let me put the numbers back for you to see the IRRs. If you're going to give the LP, and this is how I used to have it, the only way it would work before is all the cash goes to the LP until they've gotten their pref paid, and then we split at 90% after that. Well, now, here, the GP has nothing because they're not really getting a share of this. They're only getting 90-10 up to the equity repayment, which is happening here and here, these 3 years. There's equity repayment. Now they are getting, they're in a tier 3, but this I'm just showing the IRR up to the second tier, not adding the third. Obviously their full IRR is 50% for the GP, if you can count those. But I was just showing you what happened if you adjust these rates accordingly. Now, I am curiously looking at this. This actually ends up being 0, exactly the amount of the investment. Now, why would that? Oh, maybe because this is 90-10 and this is 90-10. Let me see. Now, you could also do it like that, where the LP gets all the cash flow until they've been fully repaid. So that means they've gotten the pref plus all of their money back. And then after that, then you split 50-50. So that's another way to do it. And these cash flows can be anything, and all this works. I've tested it with a arbitrary amount of, or just general cash flows to see how it works when there's enough cash flow, or if, let's say, there was none for a couple years, that's fine. Everything balances out. Here's the pref accruing. Now, if I didn't compound, you can see this is the same. And if I didn't reduce equity balance basis with that, it's actually the same forever. So that always has to be paid each year until cash goes elsewhere. So there's a lot of different scenarios that this works with, which is awesome. You'd be very happy to use this. There's been many, many years of development to get this thing to this point. Now remember, this is not an internal rate of return hurdle. I have other models for that. This is just a simple pref with some options for how cash is split up to each LP hurdle. Now, like I said, the way you can make it so that the GP is getting the same, essentially the same pref and equity repayment as the LP is set these, say this was 80-20, you would then set this to 80-20 and this to 80-20, and all that is saying is the LP and GP are going to have the same IRR up to this point. If the LP gets all their money back and the pref, then both the LP and GP will have the same internal rate of return or the return on their investment. And then now you can promote the GP since they've done that at some higher distribution rate. Usually that's how these go. But yeah, that's the update. So I added this tier on top, and there was quite a bit of work I had to do with this model to get it to not automatically just distribute 100% until the first pref hurdle was met. But it is fully dynamic, and I like the layout. I added, like I said, I added some labels here, broke out some of the rows here so it's more clear what's capital repayment, what's pref, what's the cash distributions above pref, and then the total cash flows. There's also a visual for both the LP and GP for cash flow per year as well as the cumulative balance. And you can adjust any cell in yellow. That's pretty much how the model works. Now, like and subscribe. You can get the template, download it in the link. It will be posted in the joint venture bundle. If I go to the home page here, joint venture, I'll list it in these waterfalls. So it's a version of this and this. So this pref model and then this version 3, this has catch-ups, but other than that, it's the same. But you can see if I blow this up, there's only 2 tiers here, which is how cash is split after that initial pref has been fulfilled. What I've added in the model today that I went over is another split where you can dynamically choose how cash is split up until this first hurdle is met. I've had about 3 different people over the past 6 months ask for this update, so that's why I'm doing it. I think it'll help some people and it'll just give you more flexibility that logic did not exist in any other model. The closest thing to it that I had was IRR waterfall. If you look at this one, you can choose how the cash is split on each IRR, which is including, now this is saying active repayment plus this compounded rate of return, which is different than the model we went over today, which is the pref is separate from everything else. And that's why it's a preferred return. It's not called preferred equity. If it's preferred equity, usually it doesn't matter who contributes what, the LP is going to get all their money back, and they would get all the money back until they've gotten their investment back. And then there's a profit share potential after that for the GP. But it depends on the deal. Anyway, I think this is a great addition to the Smart Helping template library. It's definitely helpful logic. It's something additional that has never been done in my templates, and I have had a couple requests for it. And I thought it was worth updating this logic too, because you can still use this the same exact way as the old template. If you just set tier 1 to 100, 0, it's then the same. Works exactly the same, but now you have added flexibility in the pref hurdle. Alrighty, that's all I got for you. I'll see you on the next one.